Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our fifth match of the World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato, brought to you by Victory Road of the day with Gabby Snyder. Gabby, we are really close right now. It is 2-2. You got to see an earlier match today, but now you're going to be looking to wrap us up throughout the end of the day with some pretty close high-stakes matches here.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to the next three games. Only one team can emerge victorious, and with China and Spain tied for 2 match wins each, these next couple of games are going to be super close and super exciting to watch. So I love the creativity we've seen so far from all the players. I love just how intense these matchups have been so far, and this next round is certainly no exception.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, this next round is no exception because we have some pretty well-known players. We have Alex Gómez and Guli, and Alex Gómez I know is a fan favorite for our Spanish viewers, so I'm sure they're excited to be watching him. And then from Guli as well, I cannot wait to see exactly what both of these players are bringing and what their strategy is to face off against each other.
And, shout outs to my boy Guli over there with the cosplay. I see you. Mad respect.
Absolutely mad respect here. Thankful to have somebody with a theme, right? I'm kind of missing those themes from the French players with all of their baguettes, and we'll be showing your boy Guli with his team. Gonna be that Calm Mind Kyogre that we saw earlier in the day, Gabby, paired with the Incineroar, Rillaboom, Zapdos, and Mimikyu.
I really like this Kyogre variant since it's a little bit more bulkier than what you would see with the Tornadus Tornadus and Kyogre when they're side by side. It does have really interesting speed control options from that Mimikyu and Amoonguss. Could possibly run Trick Room and Calm Mind on the Kyogre like we've been seeing throughout the weekend. So should be a very fun matchup and really a refreshing take on Kyogre, which I think for the longest time in Series 10 has been primarily those Tornadus teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Those Tornadus and even Serena that we've been seeing. And looking at this, Gabby, you don't see this a lot. A 10-time monthly tour champion here for Fuju, for Guli, and then 2 top 8 Jolly Breloom tours. So again, we don't get to see a lot of these players because China's circuit is different from ours and their grassroots tournaments as well, but very rarely do you get to put a 10x next to any accomplishment in Pokemon. So really excited to be seeing that. But then if we jump over to Guli's opponent, Alex, some pretty incredible accolades for him as well, and he'll be running a team that we've seen already today as well, but very excited to see both of these teams coming out.
Yeah, the Calyrex Shadow Whimsicott Nihilego team honestly is one of the teams that I'm most afraid of in the Series 10 format, as there is just so much offensive pressure between Astral Barrage, Grimnay, and the Nihilego, assuming it's holding Power Herb and can get that one turn charge up on Meteor Beam. So it has a nice Firewater Grass core to round things out, which should give Alex plenty of switching opportunities to ensure that the Whimsicott, the Calyrex, and the Nihilego are positions on the field where he wants them. And he certainly has is familiar with the world stage, with getting top 8 at the World Championships in 2019, winning the UK National Championships in 2016, and a regional championship back in 2015. So this should be a really exciting matchup between Alex and Guli, if only because of their accomplishments and how these teams are going to match up.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups where I feel like either player wishes they brought something with Wide Guard, right? Yeah. Even those Araquanids, because you're dealing with things like a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse. Oftentimes on those Trick Room Kyogres, to run that Calm Mind, they'll drop that Water Spout, right? And looking at it, again, this is a Rocky Helmet meta, and I will say this until I cannot cast anymore, but I love Rocky Helmet Zapdos, even if it doesn't come to this game. And then really interesting as well to see just kind of all the items, right? It is showing a leftovers, which does pretty further confirm it in my mind for it to be a Calm Mind Kyogre here, but allows you to kind of worry about maybe what item this Calyrex is holding.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting matchup, because the first thing that jumps out at me, and not even just the Calyrex, it's honestly the Trick Room on Guli's side of the field. With the Mimikyu and Mental Herb in particular, that means that Mimikyu should be able to get Trick Room off, barring a Astral Barrage plus another attack, maybe a Grassy Glide or a Aqua Jet from Alex's side of the field. So going into this turn 1, that's something that Guli has to respect if he is planning on bringing the Trick Room mode of his team, which he's tempted to do, as Nihilego and Calyrex and even Urshifu are some of the fastest Pokemon in the metagame right now.
Yeah, and another thing too with Amoonguss on the field, right, is you have to worry about positions of something like safety goggles, and that Amoonguss we saw is holding the Koba berry, which is a flying type super effective berry, and there aren't really any Pokemon that can go for some super effective flying type attacks, so maybe a berry that doesn't get utilized to its full advantage in this game, but instead Calyrex Incineroar is the lead, and the Rillaboom and the Mimikyu, like you said, so could deal with maybe a fake out on this Rillaboom, but you may just want to go for that double target on the Whimsicott, unless this Rillaboom goes for that faster fake out.
Rillaboom most likely will go for the fake out onto the Incineroar because it will guarantee the Trick Room being set. I mean, the other interesting thing about the Incineroar being led next to the Calyrex in particular is Intimidate most likely ensures Shadow Sneak won't be a one-hit knockout onto that Calyrex, as I've seen some trainers running Mimikyu start to go for that. But it also, I think more importantly, means a double target from Alex would result in the Calyrex's attack breaking the disguise, and then the Incineroar's attack to deal damage. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if Incineroar has Darkest Lariat, that can get a knockout on Mimikyu, but I don't think the double target's necessarily going to be in play this turn.
Yeah, absolutely. The fake out, that faster fake out from that Rillaboom will go into the Incineroar, prevent that Incineroar from going for its own fake out. Calyrex here will be going for that Astral Barrage. We'll be able to break the disguise on this Mimikyu, make it chip a little bit of its HP there, just the way that Mimikyu works in this mechanic. Nobody is running those Focus Sash Mimikyus anymore, even though it was a really nice move to have for a little while. And we'll show that that Calyrex is holding that Life Orb. So Trick Room gets up here, will allow for maybe this Kyogre to come in and start to get a couple of big moves off, but now you got to fear for that Shadow Sneak. You know that this isn't a Focus Sash Calyrex.
Exactly, and as much as it would be great if the Kyogre could switch in for free at this point in time, I don't think Guli can necessarily rely on that. Might be safer to just go for a U-turn on that Rillaboom, get a little extra chip down onto the Calyrex spot if that's who you end up targeting, and then you can have the Mimikyu go for the bigger damage. The other thing you do have to keep in mind is that both of Guli's Pokemon are intimidated, so it might be a little bit difficult to get the knockout on Calyrex if you don't do that little bit of extra chip. And unfortunately for Guli, if the Kyogre is sent out opposite to the Calyrex in like a hard switch, it's possible that it'll take damage from Astral Barrage on the way in, and that's not necessarily want. So even though it's a bit slower and you're possibly wasting some of your Trick Room turns here, it's better to go for a U-turn or in order to get the Kyogre in safe and sound.
Yeah, Calyrex will be protecting though, so it will not be taking any damage. Incineroar going for a parting shot into this Rillaboom will lower the Rillaboom's attack another stage here and allow for some pivoting to get this Incineroar out and maybe get Alex in a better position to deal with these Trick Room turns as well. Mimikyu wasn't able to go for a Shadow Sneak, I believe, into that protected, into the protected Calyrex, but I could be mistaken. I have to double check all my speeds here. Instead though, U-turn from Linguli's Rillaboom into the opposing Rillaboom now on Alex's side will do a nice chunk of damage even at -2 here, and will allow for maybe another Pokemon to come in and maybe take some damage with this Trick Room. Will be this Incineroar that won't mind so much facing down a Calyrex as maybe that Kyogre would.
Kyogre is definitely more afraid of the Rillaboom at this point, but also the Calyrex. You're absolutely right. Getting the Intimidate down on that Rillaboom will help a lot, as the Mimikyu won't be as threatened by some of the Grassy Glides, which really is Alex's preferred mode of attacking right now, given that the dimensions are still going to be twisted for a few turns. Guli's in a really interesting spot where he could go for a fake out into the Rillaboom and possibly try and switch out this Mimikyu back to his own Rillaboom to drop that Intimidate. I'm not necessarily sure he needs to, because the Mimikyu is certainly going to do a lot of damage to this Calyrex regardless, but he has to be careful knowing that if Calyrex is allowed to attack this turn, it will definitely KO the Mimikyu with Astral Barrage. There's no questions about that. So it's just to be careful and positioning. If Guli thinks that he can win the rest of this game without relying on a second Trick Room, then maybe you leave that Mimikyu in and just take that risk. Otherwise, though, you have to keep it protected, because once Trick Room is over, this Calyrex certainly would love to come back out onto the field and clean up the game for Alex.
Yeah, Incineroar switches in, gets that Intimidate off once again. Most importantly, I actually said a Shadow Sneak miss, but it was instead a Play Rough miss onto that Incineroar. Calyrex also switches out here for the Urshifu for Alex, so revealing that Urshifu in the back to maybe do a little bit more damage, but the Shadow Seek instead will go into that Urshifu slot, do a small amount of chip, not as much as you maybe would like, and a Darkest Lariat will do even less from one Incineroar onto that Urshifu. So a really nice switch from Alex to protect his Calyrex during these Trick Room turns.
Exactly, and at this point in time, Alex still has to play down the rest of these Trick Room turns, but Incineroar and Urshifu are a little bit better suited to do so. My big question right now is whether or not this Urshifu knows Detect, as being able to Detect for one of the 2 remaining turns is certainly going to help Alex a lot. Alternatively, you could just hope for another Play Rough miss. It's already happened once, it could happen again. And this Urshifu, as a result, could stall through the remainder of the Trick Room turns and then go for a Surging Strikes or 2 into the Kyogre. The one thing that I think Guli still has to be careful about is keeping in mind his post-Trick Room game plan. He's leaving this Mimikyu on the field a lot, and while it's worried that come the end of Trick Room, he'll be in a position where Alex will be able to easily knock it out and, you know, make it really tough for Guli to gain an advantage again.
Yeah, Kyogre switches in here, though, happy to not be facing down a Rillaboom or a Calyrex. Urshifu goes for a Detect to maybe avoid something like this Play Rough here that goes into that Protect slot from that Mimikyu. Incineroar will be able to go for a Parting Shot here onto this Kyogre, which is going to be super helpful to lower that special attack, since this Kyogre is going to need that Calm Mind setup moving forward just to get that extra power out that it normally has by carrying something like a choice item to allow it to go for some more powerful water type attacks, even with the Rain Boost as well. So Alex will be able to send in one of his Pokemon, probably that Rillaboom, who's not going to mind facing down this Kyogre with only a few turns of Trick Room left. I believe only 1.
Exactly. There's only 1 turn of Trick Room left. Rillaboom does a nice job of resisting any of Kyogre's attacks, and on top of that, most likely has Fake Out, which could flinch the Kyogre or deal a little bit of damage to whatever Guli switches in for that slot. Alex is doing a fantastic job of slowly playing down Trick Room, and I think that moving forwards in this game, I'm really curious to see how Guli is going to take advantage of this last turn of Trick Room. I think that if you're going to play a Kyogre and you're going to have that as a key part of your end game, you have to switch it out here to keep it safe. And Intimidate from the Incineroar in the back of your party would really help Mimikyu out as well. And if you do switch in that Incineroar here, you will have access to Fake Out next turn, which gives Mimikyu a better chance of, you know, not taking enough damage to be KO'd, as you could flinch the Urshifu, and at that point an Intimidated Rillaboom or possibly even another Incineroar thing will damage. The one thing that Guli could potentially try and do here, which is a bit more risky, is he could try and catch Alex on switching maybe the Calyrex back in or something if Alex anticipates Guli taking a more passive turn. But that would be such a big read this early on in game 1. I don't think we'll necessarily see that play out.
Yeah, I would love to see a big read early, but at this point, especially in Trick Room, it is better to play safe by switching in your Incineroar in front of a Rillaboom. Urshifu switches out here, Calyrex comes in, so Calyrex will be able to do some big damage if Trick Room is allowed to expire and not go up on that next game. And this is going to mean that this Mimikyu, I believe, went for a Play Rough and got the miss here, while Rillaboom goes for a Fake Out here, while the Mimikyu goes for a Play Rough into the Calyrex. So Calyrex is going to be able to take a little bit of damage, far better than the Urshifu would have. So great play by Alex, Gabby. I believe that you might be laughing a little bit over there into your mic.
Sometimes you call plays that you know you could never execute in real life, and you just get really excited about it. This was one of those turns. Fortunately for Guli, the Calyrex coming out on the field right now isn't necessarily the worst thing. In fact, Guli could go for the double target. We've already seen Throat Chop from that Incineroar. So we know that it can deal damage to that Calyrex. It has not been intimidated yet. That plus a Shadow Sneak on the Mimikyu will guarantee the knockout on Calyrex at the cost of this Mimikyu. It's definitely a risk, and given that Guli has been trying to keep Trick Room around so far, it feels like he's been trying to keep that central to his game plan. That's going to be really important, but a substitute really opens up the game for Alex regardless of what speed is on the field.
Yeah, Alex, like you said, substitute Calyrex U-turn with that Rillaboom, gonna allow him to maybe switch in something else to help deal with any of these Pokemon, even if this Trick Room goes up, because now that this means that there isn't going to be a whole lot of output, you're going to need at least an extra attack to help deal with this Calyrex just to break through that sub, even if you have two Pokemon on the field that can do super effective damage to it, right? So for Alex, he's going to have to make sure he can send in something to maybe capitalize a little bit more, even if Trick Room is allowed to go up. His Pokemon are all pretty speedy though. Incineroar is going to be a good option. Allow for some Fake Out in the next turn and get another Intimidate off to help deal with two of these Pokemon that can be pretty physically powerful.
Yes, but I don't think that Intimidate is going to bother this Incineroar too much, as it will Parting Shot immediately into another Pokemon. Guli could also potentially use this to get the Kyogre out on the field, go for a Water Spout next turn, or just protect while you switch the Mimikyu in and out of the field to drop the 2 or 3 Intimidates that it has on it right now. And then with the help of maybe a Fake Out from your Incineroar next turn, go for big damage, because, you know, the Trick Room was able to successfully be set up, and really all Guli has to do is figure out how he can get one attack from one of his Pokemon to connect with that Calyrex prior to Kyogre attacking. A Grassy Glide certainly would do it, though I think that Guli would be a little bit hesitant to set up the terrain for his opponent. Incineroar certainly will underspeed that Kyogre on his side of the field, and Alex, if he's not careful with how he times his protects on this Calyrex, assuming it does have access to it, could really get caught off guard by Guli.
Yeah, this is something really interesting for me, Gabby, too, is the different Calyrex sets we've seen over the day. Mimikyu, though, switches out for that Incineroar, like you said, as a possibility for this Incineroar to be able to come in and put some more pressure on. Again, having Dark-type moves can be really helpful here. A Protect from the Kyogre, though, will prevent any sort of damage or Fake Out from this Incineroar, most importantly, to allow this Kyogre to be able to go for that Water Spout at full health. Calyrex here also goes for that Astral Barrage. It will not connect onto that Kyogre, but it will connect onto the Incineroar that has just switched in for that Mimikyu, and it will take a pretty good chunk of damage, bring it down to well over half of its HP on this Incineroar as well, with a critical hit to boot. So a pretty strong Calyrex, but that Life Orb is still chipping away some of its HP every turn.
Exactly, and the fact that Calyrex is at what appears to be exactly 50% of its health remaining is a great sign for this Kyogre, as whatever attack it has, either Origin Pulse or Water Spout, is certainly going to be enough to KO it, assuming that Guli's Incineroar can break that sub.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Guli's Incineroar can break that sub, it means it's not going for a Fake Out either. So at least you know, too, that your Incineroar could possibly go for something like another offensive move, but it's probably not going to face any sort of powerful Water-type move from this Kyogre first and foremost, right? You're switching your Incineroar and your Rillabooms around because one faces off the Kyogre much better, but then the other one faces off against pretty much the rest of the Pokemon besides Kyogre. Rillaboom comes in much more comfortable to be drowning in water a little bit more from this Kyogre than that Incineroar is. Cats cannot swim very well, but Rillaboom probably can a bit better. This Calyrex, though, will be going for a Protect this turn to help stall out these Trick Room turns and make sure that it's not dealing any damage to that substitute and allow it to kind of hang out a little bit better. A Throat Chop, though, from the from the Incineroar into the Rillaboom, and the Calm Mind from the Kyogre, able to call this turn, not going to have to worry about taking any damage and start getting itself set up and dangerous.
Those Calm Mind special defense boosts, though, that'll only help Kyogre with special attacks, and this Rillaboom is still more than able to go for a Grassy Glide here. It hasn't been intimidated yet, so it's going to be at whatever its full power is. So my big question about this Kyogre is, you know, it's definitely bulky, but is it bulky enough to take a Grassy Glide unintimidated from this Rillaboom? And if so, will Guli go for the double into the Calyrex this turn? Because if that's not Origin Pulse on this Kyogre, I'm assuming it has to be at this point, then you could be in a really tough spot where Rillaboom does just enough damage to Kyogre to ensure that Water Spout won't be a KO. And then Origin Pulse has its own risk of missing, so it's definitely not a comfortable play for Guli to make here. He could certainly maybe protect the Kyogre and then switch in something and then switch in the Incineroar again to get an Intimidate down on Rillaboom, but that would take another 2 turns of Trick Room, and he's slowly running out of time.
Yeah, Mimikyu, though, does come back onto the field. We'll at least be able to kind of deal with this. The fake out, though, from the Rillaboom won't be able to go into that Mimikyu because of that ghost typing, while an Origin Pulse connects with both of these Pokemon, does just a little bit to Rillaboom, but it does bring it down to half of its HP, and most importantly, breaks that sub, which could allow for something like a Shadow Sneak on the next turn here. Calyrex, though, goes for that Astral Barrage into both of these Pokemon. Will be enough to take care of the Mimikyu, I believe, because that disguise is broken, and does a pretty good chunk to this Kyogre anyway, even though it's not, and most importantly, it's getting that Grenade boost, so we'll be able to do more on the next turn.
Yeah, but it goes to show you how important these Calm Minds are for Kyogre, as it's essentially turned a 2-hit knockout into a 3 or 4-hit knockout after leftovers and grassy terrain recovery. So that switch there, it is unfortunate that the Mimikyu did get KO'd by the Calyrex and it got that Grenade boost, but fortunately for Guli, that was a switch he had to make to get the Incineroar on the field now, bringing back that fake out and more importantly intimidating the Rillaboom. This is guaranteed that as long as Kyogre is able to connect a Origin Pulse on one of the next, well, I guess there's only one turn of Trick Room remaining, so on the next turn, then that'll definitely knock out that Calyrex. If Alex decides to protect the Calyrex this turn, he can at least keep the Kyogre safe, but he will have to figure out what to do now that Trick Room cannot be reset. So I think if I were Guli, I would just go on the full offense this turn, and worst case scenario, you have Rillaboom with Grassy Glide in the back. Kyogre can take two more Astral Barrages, assuming no Grimnade shenanigans, and use that to just power through to victory.
Yeah, and like you said, Grimnade shenanigans, but like you said, full offense, if that means that you go for a Flare Blitz into this Rillaboom, means that you're not going to be going for something like a fake out. Rillaboom, though, switches out. Urshifu comes in, so Urshifu also going to be a Pokemon that can handle something like an Origin Pulse pretty well, but a Parting Shot instead is the move of choice to lower the attack of that Urshifu and help maybe protect its partner Pokemon a little bit more as it switches in and out once again for Guli, who's going to be forced to bring in his own Rillaboom here, which is also pretty comfy looking at. It's these Fire Water Grass cores, Abby. I feel like Hop when I mention all of these type advantages as we move forward in the game, but the Origin Pulse misses Urshifu. Actually will be able to hit the Calyrex most importantly, but it is going to be tough to not get that extra damage, but you get rid of the Grenade boost, so now that Calyrex is off the field, you can move around a little bit more, even with Fake Out on pressure for the next few turns, or the next turn with your own Rillaboom.
Yeah, that was the perfect play for Guli, honestly. I mean, yeah, Origin Pulse could have missed the Calyrex and that would have been a bit of trouble, but the Urshifu, it didn't take damage from the Origin Pulse, but it's taken enough damage to break a potential Focus Sash, and given that Rillaboom is going to be Guli's Pokemon of choice to attack into that slot, I think that's really the best you can hope for. It's a pretty straightforward play for Guli to send in the Incineroar, possibly for that Kyogre, as the remaining Pokemon on Alex's side of the field are physical attackers, and Kyogre won't necessarily benefit from the special defense boost anymore. Try and maybe get an Intimidate down on his opponent's Pokemon, and then go for a Grassy Glide or Fake Out into the Rillaboom. Maybe go for that next turn if you're not too worried about how the fake outs are going to pair up here, but I do worry how these Rillaboom are going to interact, as we haven't seen them move together on the same turn yet.
Yeah, Incineroar switches in though for the Urshifu, will lower the attack of the Rillaboom on Guli's side, so it will be able to help kind of mitigate that a little bit. The fake out though from Guli's Rillaboom onto the Rillaboom on Alex's side, so that means that Alex's Rillaboom will not be able to move this turn, while they both will take an Origin Pulse. Incineroar not going to be the biggest fan of that. Is enough for the knockout here. Rillaboom gets pretty close, gets down to the bottom 25% of its HP, won't be able to deal with another one of those, but it will possibly, unless the Incineroar switches in, go for something like a Grassy Glide on the next turn.
And we also saw that 2-minute warning pop up there, so a really good heads up to both Alex and Guli that this game is coming to a close. I think that Guli is pretty safe to clean things up, as a Grassy Glide into the Urshifu plus an Ice Beam on that Kyogre should guarantee the knockout onto the Rillaboom this upcoming turn. As tempting as it is to keep going for Origin Pulses, I think that you just have to go for accuracy here. If you're a little bit worried about damage from that Rillaboom, you can protect this turn, Grassy Glide into the Urshifu, and hope that Alex doesn't go for a detect. But really, as long as Guli manages to keep the Pokemon advantage until the final turn of this game, he's guaranteed to win this match. So very well played game from both these trainers in game one. I really like how Guli played throughout the second round of Trick Room. I think the first round of Trick Room, he was really struggling to positioning that he wanted, but everything just worked out really well for him the second time round.
Yeah, actually protecting too with only less than a minute left on the field with the Kyogre. A Grassy Glide into the Urshifu is not enough to knock it out fully, but it will take a good chunk of damage. The Rillaboom on Alex's side also goes for a Grassy Glide, will not be able to hit through that protect. Urshifu though does go for a close combat, gets the knockout on that Rillaboom, but drops its defense and special defense stats. But if it is that, if that Incineroar switches in, it's not going to love taking something like a Surging Strikes. It could go for that fake out in the next turn, but you're kind of hitting this tough point, right? You only have 23 seconds left. You're not really going to be able to get that last move off.
Yeah, exactly. Guli or Alex could run down the clock at this point. And given that Guli has one Pokemon at full health and the Incineroar at approximately 45 to 50% of its health, that should mean he gets the victory because of the HP advantage. And it looks like they won't even have a chance possibly to lock in moves this turn, as the clock will hit 0 as we're just burning through animations, and a good reveal of the item on that citrus berry to get some health back right now too. That was just great timing.
Yeah, that Citrus Berry is definitely coming in clutch for the Pokemon on Guli's side, just showing, hey, I have that extra HP. This is going to for sure put this game in my advantage. But, really nice play. I actually really like that they didn't reveal the Ice Beam. I think that was a nice piece of information to keep hidden, especially just saying, I'll go for the Protect. I know I've only got 2 minutes left of this game, so if I can hide this Ice Beam for a later game and make sure that this Rillaboom feels like it's comfortable dealing with me in an end game, then I can try and be a little bit trickier. So a nice piece of info to have.
Exactly. And going into game 2 in particular, I think having that Kyogre, will it take a Grassy Glide? Will it be able to retaliate with an Ice Beam? Will a +1 special attack Ice Beam be enough to knock out the Rillaboom? Those are going to all be really key questions in the second matchup. I think that going into game 2, Alex definitely has to be a bit more cautious of Trick Room. Not so much because of the first time. I feel like the first 5 turns of Trick Room, Alex did a very good job of just, playing things slowly, switching Pokemon around, keeping the threats on the field, and making sure that Guli never felt comfortable. But like with many Trick Room teams, Guli was able to get the Trick Room up a second time, and by that point, there just wasn't enough health left on Alex's side of the field to play through that second Trick Room in a similar fashion. So one adjustment that Alex could make is just go on the offense opposite that Mimikyu a little bit earlier, not necessarily with the Calyrex, but just with any of the Pokemon that he has. As long as he's able to break that Mimikyu's disguise, he can do a ton of damage to it.
Yeah, the Nihilego is a switch up here. Nihilego, Rillaboom, and then Rillaboom, Mimikyu. So like that last game, right, there's nothing that can stop this Trick Room from going up, I believe, as long as your Fake Out is faster, right? Because even if the Fake Out isn't faster, but, it's a little bit tougher now, I think, bringing a Rillaboom instead of an Incineroar.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the interesting thing here is that we did see Guli's Rillaboom outspeed the opposing Rillaboom with Fake Out in the previous game. Hard to say if that was a speed tie or not, as that was the only turn both of them attacked. But Fake Out into the Nihilego would guarantee Trick Room, but will give Alex the opportunity to go for a knockoff or a grass type attack or a U-turn into that Mimikyu to break the disguise, and then next turn maybe rotate into your Incineroar and go for some big damage with a Flare Blitz or possibly even a dark type attack.
Yeah, Fake Out into the Nihilego will stop this Nihilego from moving on this turn. Rillaboom goes for a U-turn here, a Grassy Glide into that Mimikyu will break the disguise. So at least breaking the disguise allows for you to, like you said, be able to switch around, do some big damage on those next turns. But Trick Room gets up this turn, so now you're going to be able to at least maybe go for something like those Shadow Sneaks. We saw the Play Rough as well, but you're dealing down in front of a Nihilego with Sludge Bomb, who is going to be pretty happy to hit you with any type of move, I believe.
Oh yeah, Oh yeah, it will be. And the nice thing about Nihilego here too is that while it will take damage, decent damage from Rillaboom and from Mimikyu, and does have to be cautious of the knockoff from Rillaboom removing like a power herb, I think that this Nihilego is comfortable enough to stay in. And if I were in Alex's shoes, a Sludge Bomb into that Mimikyu slot would be really valuable right now. You could try and make a read and go for a Power Gem or maybe a Meteor Beam if you're comfortable ensuring your opponent's not going to knock off and you know that the Pokemon coming in is going to be that Incineroar. But Guli possibly one step ahead, sending in his Kyogre in a spot that's kind of a tough spot for a Kyogre to be in.
Yeah, Kyogre never loves looking down a Rillaboom, right? And the Rillaboom instead goes for a U-turn onto Guli's Rillaboom, so it does almost 50% of its damage, but most importantly, didn't go for a Grassy Glide into that Kyogre slot, so this Kyogre is safe for this turn from a super effective Grass type attack. If it takes any damage from this Nihilego, there's a chance that it won't do nearly as much as Alex may have wanted. Incineroar comes in though, we'll be able to put Fake Out pressure on in the next turn, gets the Intimidate off onto the Rillaboom for Guli's side. Instead though, not going to worry about that attack drop as there is another U-turn from that Rillaboom onto the Incineroar. Will allow for Guli to maybe switch out, could bring that Mimikyu right back in here and maybe get a little bit of help with those partner Pokemon, go for something like another Play Rough if needed, but maybe most importantly allow it to not take a Sludge Bomb, but it takes one anyway as the Sludge Bomb goes into that Mimikyu slot that was that Rillaboom. Does over 50% of its HP, but it does get a little bit of recovery here thanks to that grassy terrain.
A great play from Alex, most likely trying to double target that Rillaboom for the KO, but catching that Mimikyu by surprise is certainly going to be helpful. I don't think that this Kyogre will be sticking around too long on the field, as a flinch from this Incineroar plus a Sludge Bomb into that Kyogre is going to not be pleasant necessarily for the Kyogre to take, but a good read from Alex there. I find it really interesting that we didn't see Guli switch into that Incineroar of his own to go for a Fake Out this turn to try and give Kyogre a little bit of space to go for a Calm Mind. It's certainly something that Guli could go for anyways if he's trying to make speed, but given the damage down on that Mimikyu, I think he needs to match that so that if things come to it, he won't need a second round of Trick Room.
Yeah, Incineroar fakes out that Kyogre this turn, but we see a taunt actually from the Mimikyu onto that Nihilego, interestingly enough. So now this Nihilego can actually go for this Meteor Beam, but is going to be able to get that +1 in special attack. And so this Nihilego is going to be able to possibly get a really strong move off. Again, not fully accurate. I'll say this every time, and it will be commentator's terse every single time, but not this time because it does connect onto this Mimikyu slot. We'll be able to take this Mimikyu off of the field. Critical hit as well to boot. I don't believe that really mattered because Meteor Beam is so strong. This will allow this Nihilego to also get a Beast Boost, bring it up to +2 special attack, and make it just be an absolute threat on the field for any Pokemon that want to switch in. Incineroar and Rillaboom not going to be too happy.
No, and Guli is going to struggle to find the opportunity to go on the offense opposite this Nihilego once Trick Room runs out. I think there is 1 or 2 turns of Trick Room remaining at this point, and it's very key that Guli is able to attack with the Kyogre during those 2 Trick Room turns. It's tempting because to say that he should go for the Calm Mind instead, but the problem with Calm Mind right now is that you just need time, and I don't think that Guli has time knowing that the Trick Room's running down. You send in one of these Pokemon that has access to Fake Out, you go for an Origin Pulse, you hope that it connects with the Nihilego. With Rain still up on the field, you know, Nihilego special defense is decent, but that should still do a good amount, and barring a miss on the KO, you could certainly attack again with a with some other attack. It looks like Guli's trying to target with a U-turn to pick up the remainder of that damage, but with Trick Room ending in just a Alex is in a great spot to just have that Calyrex come in at that point in time and really start that snowball.
Yeah, and again, I'm loving the way he's positioning his Calyrex, right? He's not bringing it out as early as he did in that first game, allowing it to sit in the back for this game. Incineroar will do that hard switch, though, bringing the Rillaboom for Alex. Again, facing down this Kyogre that is going to be in a much better position than that Incineroar was, especially taking an Origin Pulse that is going to hit both of these Pokemon. It is going to be enough to knock out that Nihilego, most importantly, which means that that U-turn is going to do super effective damage into the Rillaboom on Alex's side, which is going to be pretty nice damage to deal as well. Instead of going for something like a fake out, brings that Rillaboom down to about a third of its HP and will allow for Guli to possibly reposition and get into Pokemon like his Incineroar, only his Pokemon Incineroar, because Mimikyu was knocked out, but Incineroar then will be able to possibly deal some damage after it gets faked out, maybe, or in case this Kyogre gets faked out.
Yeah, Guli's in a tough spot in that regard. It's too bad that the Incineroar had to come in at the end of that turn rather than this in-between turn time, as the Intimidate will only connect with that Rillaboom. Certainly will help Kyogre, but I think part of Guli's win condition at this point in time is ensuring that his own Incineroar isn't intimidated. Knowing where Alex is on the field right now, it's almost a given that this Incineroar has to make an appearance here again, partially for that fake out pressure like you mentioned, but partially also to intimidate Guli's Incineroar so that it won't be as big of a threat to the looming Calyrex in the back of Alex's party. Guli does have one final turn to take advantage of Trick Room here, and similar to what we were talking about Game 1, now might be the time to bust out that Ice Beam into the slot. We saw the Kyogre move pretty slowly relative to the Pokemon on Alex's side of the field, and you know that an Origin Pulse later will certainly knock out that Incineroar. I think that you can't necessarily risk that move missing, both in terms of accuracy and a knockout on Rillaboom. Just go for a fake out, go for the Ice Beam, try and position yourself in a way that this Kyogre will only have the Calyrex on the opposing side of the field to worry about once Trick Room is up.
Yeah, Kyogre switches out for the Rillaboom to hopefully take whatever fake out was going into it. Fake out from Incineroar into the Rillaboom on Alex's side means that that is not going to be able to move, while the parting shot from the Rillaboom on Alex's side, from the Incineroar into the Rillaboom on Guli's side is going to be able to allow it to switch out, do some more damage, to do some more stat dropping just throughout the field. Again, a very positionally heavy game. A lot of games in Trick Room are just to help stall out and put your Pokemon in a good position to move out. Calyrex, though, able to come out onto the field without the Kyogre on the field and without taking any damage yet, as it was hidden in the back the entire game.
And just as the Twisted Dimensions are to return to normal, so Guli is going to take a lot of damage this turn for the opportunity to reposition or target down that Calyrex. The Rillaboom on Guli's side of the field has been intimidated, which means a Grassy Glide might not do enough to ensure that the Throat Chop, in addition to the Rillaboom's damage, is enough for a knockout on that Calyrex, which would be really tough for Guli, as Alex will be able to pick up a knockout on both of these Pokemon after 2 Astral Barrages if that damage we saw on the Incineroar it's true in Game 2. So it's a tough spot, and I definitely could see Guli wanting to try and reposition, but even if you do get the Kyogre out on the field, it's most likely just to take damage so that the Incineroar can try and come back in unintimidated to better threaten down that Calyrex later on.
Yeah, and both of these Pokemon intimidated again by this Incineroar. Incineroar on Alex's side swapping in for his own Rillaboom. Calyrex, though, going to be able to go for a Psyshock actually into the Rillaboom on Guli's side, able to get that knockout and, get this Rillaboom out of play to allow him to maybe go for some more powerful moves and get a Grimnay boost just to start off right after this Twisted Dimensions have ended. There is going to be a parting shot from the Rillaboom on Guli's side onto the Calyrex as well for Alex. So that means at least he'll be able to reset those Intimidates maybe moving forward, but it's just going to be that Rillaboom and that Kyogre now.
It is, and I mean, to Guli's benefit, the Kyogre is holding leftovers, and when Rillaboom turns to the field, it will be bringing back the grassy terrain. So Kyogre certainly has a lot of health, but coming back on the field right as rain runs out is not going to be too helpful, as that Origin Pulse damage is really going to be important here with the Calyrex especially. I am a little bit curious about how much damage the Throat Chop will do to the opposing Calyrex. I think that Guli has to go for it this turn. If only because he's in a spot where the Calyrex is ready to set up and ready to just get as many KOs as possible. He can no longer switch. Fake Out wouldn't necessarily be beneficial onto Alex's Incineroar, since it's not the Incineroar that's going to be dealing damage. And honestly, Alex is likely to just switch it out into that Rillaboom so that he can bring back and Intimidate later on. Protect plus a switch on Alex's side of the field isn't necessarily the worst play, but he is going to keep that Calyrex safe, but a little bit differently than I think we both anticipated.
I was really anticipating the read that Guli is about to make to be working for him. Calyrex switches for Rillaboom, but this means that this Kyogre, who's going to go for an Ice Beam, is going to go into the Incineroar slot, who is going to be much more comfortable taking it than that Rillaboom might have been. And the Incineroar will go for a parting shot into the opposing Incineroar, who can now no longer switch out, and that attack drop's going to be pretty tough to deal with, but this will allow for Calyrex to come right back onto the field. So really nice positioning by Alex to make sure that he didn't go for what we might have assumed he might have gone for, and allow his Calyrex to come back out on the field without that parting shot drop.
Exactly, and the Throat Chop from this Incineroar, assuming that was what Guli locked into, will actually be targeting down the Rillaboom as part of that switch. So really just strong play from Alex there. This is why Rillaboom and Incineroar are so nice on a team together. You know, Rillaboom can switch into moves that Incineroar is weak against. Incineroar can do the same for Rillaboom. And if you play this, if you play a turn like this where you hard switch one of the Pokemon and then you parting shot the other, you're able to keep your attacker on the field essentially with no damage that turn. If Alex is still worried about, you know, how much damage this Incineroar can do, he could even protect the Calyrex, let Rillaboom go down after a Grassy Glide into Guli's Kyogre, and then send in his own Incineroar, another top of. It's a little bit of a risky play. I think given that this game went down to time in game one, you want to try and keep all three of your Pokemon around, and you don't want to be getting knockouts that you don't necessarily need to win, just to keep things safe, but it is an option that Alex has.
Yeah, the Fake Out from that Rillaboom into the Incineroar, while an Astral Barrage from the Calyrex gets both of these Pokemon down to just about half of their HP. A little bit more Life Orb chip that this Calyrex is helping to regain by that grassy terrain. The Ice Beam, though, into the Rillaboom is enough to get that knockout and hits its correct target. We'll bring in the Incineroar as Alex's last Pokemon, get one more Intimidate down, get another option for Fake Out, and then maybe another Astral Barrage. But like you said, we're starting to tick down. These games have been long and grindy, and you have to make sure that you play them to your best endgame possible.
Exactly. Now, one endgame that Guli still has available to him is you protect the Kyogre this turn, you let the Fake Out hit the Incineroar. You get another turn of grassy terrain and leftovers recovery onto that Kyogre, and then next turn you hope that Origin Pulse plus a Throat Chop onto that Calyrex will be enough to pick up the knockout. At that point in time, Calyrex will have taken 2 turns approximately worth of Life Orb damage, even with the recovery, and that just might be enough to put it within range. You know, this Incineroar is going to go regardless, as it is super weak to water type attacks. It's not necessarily over for but Alex has a way more comfortable win con at this point in time, especially if he's able to predict this Protect on the Kyogre.
Yeah, the Protect, like you said, from the Kyogre. Incineroar goes for the Fake Out into the opposing Incineroar, so a great call there from Alex. Calyrex goes for that Astral Barrage once again. We'll be able to connect with this Incineroar and do that bit of damage that we've seen it do before. It's going to be nice to have a little bit more chip. It doesn't get it down to the bottom 25% just yet, but it gets it pretty close and takes a little bit of that Life Orb chip, but now everybody's going to be getting that all-important grassy terrain recovery.
Exactly, and it's this recovery that's going to be key for Guli's win condition. Alex has to be careful here. If Kyogre is allowed to attack this turn, which, barring a critical hit, it should have the ability to, And if Origin Pulse is able to connect with that Calyrex and pick up the knockout, then Guli is going to win this game. It is completely down to the wire. Alex can protect the Calyrex here, like I was just saying, to try and prolong the win condition a bit more. But if he does that, that's just going to be another turn of recovery.
Yeah, the Astro Barrage into both of these Pokemon is enough to at least knock that Incineroar out of the game. Kyogre, though, is able to hang on. Down into the red, though, Calyrex gets that Grenade boost, so you have to make sure that you can get these knockouts, right? That you can do enough damage here. Kyogre, though, goes for that Origin Pulse. No misses onto either of these Pokemon. Will be able to at least knock out this Incineroar. Gets that Calyrex down to half of that HP. You could maybe try and protect and deal with the next turn of Grassy Terrain, but I haven't really seen any timers come up, Gabby. It's a little too close, I think.
It is a little too close, and unfortunately for the Kyogre, I don't think that all the time in the world will make a difference at this point, since you would have to wait for the Grassy Terrain to essentially run out in order to ensure that your Kyogre has more health than the opposing Calyrex, and that's just not something I see possible with only one turn of Grassy Terrain left on the field. But that game was just down to the wire. Had that Origin Pulse been a critical hit on the opposing Calyrex, then Guli would have been able to win that game, and it just was really exciting to see that play out, as it was a fairly well defended for Alex, but it was certainly a dicey one to have to try and get to.
Yeah, and that is just kind of the problem, right? With these slow and bulky Kyogre teams is you have to play, I mean, you have to do this with almost every Pokemon game, right? Is think 3 turns ahead, but then you have to think 3 turns ahead where each turn has a different option, right? And positioning your Firewater Grass Core versus their Firewater Grass Core is really important, because, I mean, you see, you know, now that Rillaboom knows he's not as safe because of that Ice Beam, it was still great positioning from Alex's side, allowing his Rillaboom to switch in on the side that we didn't expect, right? You expect that Incineroar to switch out and bring that Rillaboom in, but instead of switching that Calyrex and going for a parting shot, it allows you to be in a nicer position and protect that Rillaboom, get your Calyrex back in, and, you know, even though it was at neutral thanks to one Grenade and one parting shot, you know, you're not really losing anything by giving up what was a Grenade boost. So, you know, I think I almost just want to say that this Mimikyu needs to stay on the field more, right? You need to be able to have that second Trick Room like he was able to get in that first game.
Exactly, but Alex very smartly played in a way that denied Mimikyu that second Trick Room, taking advantage of the fact that Guli was leaving Mimikyu out on the field, so it was susceptible to all those attacks. You know, going into Game 3 in terms of adjustments, I think that Alex has to continue with the same play style we saw in that Game 1, or in that Game 2. I also like the adjustment of the Nihilego over the Urshifu, if only so that the Nihilego can hit the Mimikyu and the Incineroar super effectively on Guli's side of the field. But Guli, you know, you have to go for that Trick Room, and then you have to find a way to get Mimikyu off the field to keep it safe. As soon as its disguise is busted, it really is going to be knocked out in 1 or 2 hits, depending on what Pokemon are attacking it. And given how much of a fact that is, and given how key it was to Alex's win in Game 2, I think the best adjustment that Guli can make going into this Game 3 would be get Trick Room up, switch, keep Mimikyu off the field until it's a little safer for appearance, and then bring it back out. Maybe even bring it back out after Trick Room is over so that you can Shadow Sneak the Calyrex.
Yeah, and just like that Game 2, we have the same leads here with Rillaboom Nihilego and Rillaboom Mimikyu. So like you said, Alex trying to play with that Game 2 strategy that did him so well. Maybe a little bit of a mental grind there, but it was his way of dealing with this Mimikyu. And again, you gotta hope, you know, Guli can get it up. There's nothing stopping him from getting up Trick Room on this turn, but can still be a little bit tougher just to kind of deal with what could be a couple of tougher turns after, especially if this Nihilego is allowed to go for something like another Meteor Beam onto a busted Disguise Mimikyu.
Yeah, and the nice choice about Meteor Beam there was that it would have caught an Incineroar on the switch as well. So Guli, you know, he has to make his choices for moves this turn, knowing that switching the Incineroar into the Mimikyu slot isn't necessarily going to be safe. You don't really want the Kyogre to take that much damage either so early on in the
Yeah, absolutely. The fake out, though, from the Rillaboom onto the Nihilego will at least prevent that Nihilego from moving this turn, while a Grassy Glide busts the Disguise, very similar to that last game that we saw, will still allow for this Mimikyu to go up, get that Trick Room up into the field, and will allow for this Mimikyu to be able to hopefully utilize that more. But you have to still, again, be careful. If you switch in your Incineroar, you might be at the face of taking something like a Power Gem or a Meteor Beam. Meteor Beam, we know it has. Power Gem sometimes as a secondary rock move that they will carry.
Well, the nice thing about Meteor Beam, though, is that it will take 2 turns in order to charge up, and Guli does have access to knockoff. This was something I mentioned as a possible play in Game 2. In Game 3, if you know that Nihilego is going to go for a Meteor Beam at some point, maybe not even this turn, we might see that Sludge Bomb first, like we saw back in Game 2. If you get rid of that Power Herb, you really remove the possibility of that attack. And I think that's something really important for Guli if he wants to be able to switch this Incineroar in safely.
Yeah, Nihilego gets taunted though by that Mimikyu, while Alex's Rillaboom goes for the U-turn into the Rillaboom here. And this is, I think, the 3rd turn where we've seen Guli's Rillaboom move first on the field. So I think you can pretty comfortably say that Rillaboom on Guli's side is faster. Incineroar switches in here for Alex. Intimidate, again, very important, but also fake out pressure possibly on the next turn if it needs it. This is going to mean though that this Rillaboom goes for that knockoff, I believe, like you said, will knock off that Power Herb for that Nihilego. Nihilego will charge up that Meteor Beam, but it's going to take those 2 turns now. Like you said, it gets that special attack boost for the moment, but it means that it cannot move next turn. It has to go for that move, so you can at least possibly go for a Protect if you need to, or just put yourself in a better position to take it out.
Yeah, and it's really tough, though, for Guli, since neither of the 2 Pokemon present on the field, I think, have access to Protect. So you have the benefit of knowing that in presumably the Mimikyu spot, like in Game 2, is going to be taking that, Meteor Beam, and you can maybe switch around your Rillaboom, or possibly send in your Kyogre in order to take it, but that's going to be a really risky play, since Kyogre, if it's already down below half, and if Trick Room runs out and that Calyrex is able to come back in, that's going to be enough for the KO. So Guli still has to be very careful here, though I can see why it's tempting to switch the Mimikyu out into the Kyogre. If only next turn, assuming you survive, you will have a great opportunity to go on the offense.
Yeah, and that that Kyogre does switch in for the Mimikyu here, sets up the rain, will allow for this Incineroar not to be able to have powerful fire types, but that doesn't matter as it switches into the Rillaboom on Alex's side to once again better deal with the Kyogre. But a U-turn from Guli's Rillaboom is going to do a pretty good chunk of damage onto Alex's Rillaboom and allow again for another switch. Could be this Mimikyu once again, maybe again having some more play rough options, some Shadow Sneak again, just to be able to protect it. But again, like we're seeing, Gabby, it's still sitting on the field. It's still going to be susceptible to maybe taking this damage. The Meteor Beam does connect on this turn, hits into that Mimikyu slot, is not enough to knock it out, interestingly enough here. So it is able to hang on with just 6 HP plus a little bit gained back from that grassy terrain.
But a prediction from Alex, targeting the spot that wasn't the Mimikyu with that Meteor Beam, possibly anticipating that Guli would switch a Pokemon in to take it, either the previous turn or, maybe even prior to that knockoff. So Mimikyu again in a spot where it can easily be knocked out from a priority attack from this Rillaboom, and as a result, Guli will not be able to use Trick Room again for this game. And the rough thing about this turn in particular is that Guli has to take a turn to protect Kyogre under his own Trick Room. Just because Mimikyu has so little health left, there's really nothing that Guli can do other than just let it get knocked out and then be able to send in something safely.
Yeah, the Rillaboom here goes for a Grassy Glide into the Kyogre. Kyogre not going to be able to deal or take any damage through that Protect. Play rough, though, from the Mimikyu into the Rillaboom. Does a good chunk of damage. Nihilego also targeting into that Kyogre slot as well here. So probably with that Sludge Bomb, but, now at least this Mimikyu is a little bit still on the field. Maybe be able to get something off a little bit earlier in that next turn. Play rough did a pretty good chunk of damage.
It did, and another play rough would certainly threaten a KO onto the Rillaboom, and there is 1 turn of Trick Room remaining, so that's a possibility for Guli, but I do have to wonder about leaving the Kyogre field as it is right now. The opposing Rillaboom has not been intimidated yet, so a Grassy Glide would be doing sort of full power of its attack damage to that Kyogre, and that again could potentially put Kyogre into a position where if a Pokemon is KO'd this turn, Calyrex comes in, Calyrex is able to knock it out. It's great that this Kyogre has access to so much recovery. I think that's probably what Guli is trying to take advantage of, but you can't really take advantage of that. You've taken damage, and unfortunately with the Trick Room about to expire, it might be a little bit too late for that to work out as Guli intended.
Yeah, Mimikyu switches out here, bringing out the Incineroar to at least get that Intimidate down onto that Rillaboom to stop it from maybe getting a full power Grassy Glide off onto the field. Not going to worry too much about Nihilego, who is a special attacker. That Grassy Glide actually goes into the Incineroar slot, though, so what was the Mimikyu probably fishing for a knockout. Origin Pulse connects onto both of these Pokemon. Will be able to do a ton of damage, able to knock out that Nihilego. Not enough to get rid of the Rillaboom just yet, as it can take that damage pretty comfortably, but a really nice play, I think, just to be able to make sure that that Kyogre stays on the field another turn.
Alex incorrectly predicting the Protect on Guli's Kyogre and losing the Nihilego for it. It's not necessarily the end of the world, as again Trick Room did just expire and this Calyrex will be able to take the stage, but Calyrex will be standing opposite a Kyogre who's still somehow at full health, and the Incineroar who's going to be able to take an Astral Barrage very well. I like how Alex sends in the Incineroar this turn just to get that Intimidate down and to apply some fake out pressure to Guli's side of the field, but with Rillaboom at such low health, you have to wonder how Guli can knock it out this turn so that he can lock Alex into his final two Pokemon and then do what Alex did in that previous game where you just intimidate Parting Shot to ensure that the opposing Incineroar can't do damage and you're able to successfully target down the Calyrex on the opposing side. I don't think you necessarily need Trick Room to win this anymore for Guli. It's nice that the Mimikyu is still in the back, as, you know, like I mentioned, that Shadow Sneak could come in handy depending on what final two Pokemon are remaining for Alex, but it's a tight spot for Alex to be in, and he needs to find a way to quickly gain an advantage and safely get that Calyrex out onto the field if he wants to win this game 3 and bring Spain into the lead for the set.
Yeah, Kyogre swaps out for the Rillaboom, knowing there's only 2 turns of rain left as well, and gets that grassy terrain back onto the field. Incineroar, though, goes for a fake out into that Rillaboom slot that Guli did just send in, while the Rillaboom on Alex's side goes for the U-turn into the Rillaboom on Guli's side. Will allow for a Grassy Glide will allow for a good chunk of damage, but a Throat Chop into the Rillaboom on Alex's side will be enough to knock it out, so that does lock in the Incineroar and the Calyrex left for Alex to come onto the field. So that Grassy Glide did a nice little bit of damage, but it didn't go into a Kyogre, most importantly.
Exactly, and I think that Guli was expecting the U-turn rather than the Grassy Glide there, using Throat Chop to deal more damage to the Calyrex. As you know, it's the Pokemon that has to switch in, given that there were only 3 remaining, but also to ensure that you're not dealing damage, weakened fire-type damage in the rain. So again, a really good call there from Guli, just covering in case that Rillaboom decided to U-turn. Now that Alex is down to his final 2 Pokemon, though, this is the perfect opportunity to go for a Parting Shot into the opposing Incineroar or into the opposing Calyrex. Calyrex does have Substitute, and something Alex could try to do here to give himself a little extra bulk to play through this endgame would be to set up a Substitute this turn, but with Knockoff and Throat Chop available to Guli, you have to wonder if this Calyrex would even be allowed to keep that Substitute longer than a single turn.
Yeah, fake out though from the Rillaboom goes into the Incineroar on Alex's side. Calyrex does set up that Substitute, like you said, so will allow for a little bit of extra bulk and maneuverability. However, the Throat Chop into the Calyrex Substitute will break that Substitute this turn, allow just to make sure that this Calyrex is going to have to maybe deal with another attack on the next turn unless it goes for another Substitute again, but there is no switch, so rain has ended. Kyogre could come back in and reset that possibly, but you know, a little bit tougher for Alex knowing that he didn't have to deal with just a Parting Shot and allow that Substitute to get knocked out right away.
Exactly. I wonder if Alex is going to keep going for substitutes at this point to try and buy the Incineroar some time to maybe Flare Blitz into Guli's Rillaboom for knockout. It's not necessarily a comfortable strategy going for multiple substitutes, as you are draining 25% of your health with each use of the move. But given that Alex needs time right now, that might be one of the best ways for him to find that time. The only downside to trying to find time is that every single turn is a turn that could potentially parting shot and then could potentially come back in and initiate. So Alex's win conditions are slowly whittling down, and as long as Calyrex is forced to be on the defense to wait for the Kyogre to make an appearance, to wait to go for those big attacks, that's a really tough spot for Alex to be in.
Yeah, Calyrex protects this turn though, but the U-turn from the Rillaboom goes into the Incineroar on Alex's side. Gonna allow for a switch, gonna allow maybe for more fake out resetting. Kyogre can come in here, get that rain back up, be able to start putting out some Origin Pulse pressure as well, and just be able to deal with a little bit more just put out a little bit more offense in front of this Incineroar that isn't going to love looking down any sort of water type attack, especially now that its fire type attacks are weakened, like this Flare Blitz that is going to go into the Kyogre right now, which does very little damage into that Kyogre slot, does a little bit of recoil as well to the Incineroar, while the Incineroar on Linguli's side goes for that Throat Chop into the Calyrex, I believe, and is not able to do any damage there through that Protect. It could have also been a parting shot, but I might be mistaken.
It's a tough call, but I think regardless of what that attack was, since it's a Calyrex, the point stands that Incineroar and Kyogre are essentially at full health on Guli's side of the field, and as a result will be able to take a Astral Barrage this turn. So Origin Pulse, Throat Chop. You may miss Origin Pulse on both Pokemon, honestly, but with Throat Chop targeting the Calyrex, I think you're still essentially guaranteeing your win condition at this point in time. It's just a matter of how many Origin Pulses will it take to connect with the opposing Incineroar at this point for Guli, which is kind of insane because if you think about it, this was very similar to played out where Mimikyu had all that damage taken early on, and as a result Guli couldn't go for a second Trick Room. Yet here we are, you know, well after the duration of the Twisted Dimensions in game 3, and Guli still has access to all 4 of his Pokemon, staring down Alex's remaining Calyrex Incineroar. Guli was just able to very comfortably adjust to this play style, and even though Alex is going to try and buy some more time with substitutes, if Origin Pulse connects here, that could just be game over.
Yeah, and it does connect onto both of these Pokemon, able to knock this Incineroar out, will take care of that substitute for Calyrex, but this Calyrex is going to have to deal with this Incineroar in the next, few seconds, really being able to go for a Throat Chop here. Going to do super effective damage onto this Calyrex. It is enough to knock it out, so that puts the game into China's favor here, and that makes it 3-2 China heading in to the next match. So again, I've said this I think a couple of times now, we're watching this in the order that the players played it. So that is a ton of pressure, right, on these players. This is absolutely high stakes. Like, if I'm one of these players, I'm stressing. I'm saying we were at 2-2, now it's 2-3, and we need to win this next game because next game's match point. But, absolutely insane. Just best of sevens can be so fun for these teams. I'm very excited to see them moving forward. It's been cool to see multiple Kyogre Calyrex teams. We've seen the Combine Kyogre set already today. That Calyrex team I think we saw as well earlier, but everybody plays them a little bit differently. So it's great to see how these players are adapting these teams to their play styles.
And not only that, how the players are adapting these teams and how you play the teams to the matchups. Seeing that Trick Room option on Guli's side of the field was really the key standout for me in this round. And I think that Alex did a fantastic job trying to stall through those Trick Room turns. But in that game 3, Guli was able to just take advantage of the fact that he knew Alex would sort of play through those first 5 turns, try and target the Mimikyu, and use that to his advantage. So a very well played set from 2 fantastic Pokemon trainers. With only 2 matches left between China and Spain, like you said, that everybody's just getting antsy, and we're gonna continue to see some fantastic games. I cannot wait.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I will be antsy from behind the camera as I'm watching the rest of the matches that you guys will be casting, which means we'll be taking a quick break. So do not go anywhere, guys. Next match, match point for China, could also mean Spain could go, and then we could be going to a match 7 here. I keep thinking game 7, like any sort of major sporting event, but a little bit of the same excitement. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Test